Without further ado, let us get into the Federalist Papers. Okay, now I have a little bit of an article here that just kind of introduces them perfectly. I'm going to read it, and then we're going to discuss it, and I want to hear what your take of what it is as a little more specific details. All right, so this is from history.com. In October 1787, the first in a series of 85 essays arguing for the ratification of the proposed U.S. Constitution appeared in the Independent Journal under the pseudonym Publius, addressed to the people of the state of New York. And the essays, now known as the Federalist Papers, were actually written by the statesmen Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, John Jay, leading supporters of the Constitution and the strong nation government it created. They would have been published serially from 1787 to 88 in several New York newspapers. The first 77 essays, including Madison's famous Federalist 10, appeared in the book form in 1788, entitled The Federalist. It has been hailed as one of the most important political documents in U.S. history. Would you say that's accurate?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a preliminary to the Bill of Rights also, so yeah.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting. All right, so how would you describe what the Federalist Papers was, and what was the real reason? Obviously, it was to have the states ratify. The states weren't all on board. What's the deal?
Yes. A good way to describe it would be a kind of rhetoric, because it was not only addressing Congress itself, but it was also disseminated throughout the American people to let everybody know it's like, hey, we have these specific problems between the states and between creating smaller confederacies in our country. So what we need to do is unite under one banner and one central government, because the central government can give this and this benefit to this and this state. And yeah, it was basically like an essay or a community letter.
Okay. So I think a lot of people it might actually be a surprise to know that we weren't united as someone might think in 1776 when the Constitution was written. It's like, America was born then, but it wasn't fully formed. I guess is the best way to put it. So I guess the Federalist Papers, to make sense of it, would be to convince everybody that that's the best course of action, right?
Yes, and one thing that the Founding Fathers, but also the people of America at that time, were very concerned about was that they just got out of under the thumb of Great Britain, a centralized, tyrannical government, clumsy, in debt, much like now.
Yeah.
So the way they formulated the Articles of Confederation was that it was very, very centered on the states, each individual state. So it was one nation, and everyone spoke a similar language and had the same religion, blah, blah, pretty uniform. But each state had its own economy, very different. For instance, the southern states still had slavery. And so there was all this tit for tat with how to tax things in the Articles of Confederation, which was the preemptive of the U.S. Constitution. And the southern states negotiated, it's like, no, we don't want taxes this way because it screws us because of our population size. And so tit for tat with that. But it was, as you said, focused very much on states' rights. Now, the essays go in depth, the Federalist Papers, of yes, you will still have states' rights. Yes, states will have representatives and everyone will have equal representation, and you will all have a lot of autonomy. We just need this certain thing. We need Congress to be a centralized power and have the ability to actually collect taxes from all of you, and we can't let you split up into your own separate little bands and create your treaties between like all the the southern economies were all similar, so obviously, as what happened with the Civil War, they would band together, but then that would make them vulnerable to attacks from, like the Dutch, for instance, who were big players at the time because of their shipping power.
Yeah, the Navy.
Yeah,
Right.
Yep, and also they controlled all the trade. They were basically the middlemen of that time. And so they had to deal with, we don't want your goods to get undercut because you are a separate confederacy and you enter into different treaties. So that's why, even though you don't want necessarily all the same tax laws, we need one national government to negotiate treaties and the tariffs, etc., so forth.
And also to bring us all under the same currency, correct?
We did have it, apparently. The currency.
Oh, really?
Yes. It's a very specific thing, and I'll try to explain it carefully. basically the currency was the same. I think it was like gold sovereign still, or they might have been trending into the dollar at that time. But I believe that because, simply speaking, more trade went through New York specifically than North Carolina, that North Carolina's like bills weren't as lucrative as like a place like New York.
Okay.
And so that's why a lot of these essays are addressed to the people of New York. Because another thing I just read that the capital of the United States at that time was New York City.
Ah.
They did back and forth with it being Philadelphia, but then they were considering New York City, and there was a lot of commerce in New York City at the time. So it's like it was basically addressing a central hub of commerce and also political power to share the wealth.
Okay. This sums it up right here. This is further down in the same article. It says there's a debate over the Constitution. As the first written constitution of the newly independent United States, the Articles of the Confederation, as you mentioned, nominally granted Congress the power to conduct foreign policy, maintain armed forces, and coin money. But in practice, this centralized government body had little authority over the individual states, including no power to levy taxes, regulate commerce, or which hampered the new nation's ability to pay its outstanding debts from the Revolutionary War. And you actually mentioned that because they had no way to actually tax everybody and pay for the army that they were trying to build to then protect, the whole country from the Dutch Navy or, pirates. I'm sure was a lot more prevalent back then.
Yes.
Although I do have a side story of meeting pirates myself. Land pirates, they're called, in Belgium. I'm not joking. This is a real story. I saw land pirates breaking into an RV, and I was traveling in an RV, and I saw them. And I guess that's a normal thing. All right, I'm getting sidetracked, but it's a cool story.
That is a cool story.
Needed to bring that out because I actually did deal with pirates in the past. All right, so the Federalist Papers is to really try to, how do I put it, clean things up, if you will, right? Is to really try to sum everything up and make this country function fluidly instead of being a hodgepodge of different people trying to do their different things, right? It kind of sums it up better.
And to not let other nations at the time who were bullying us, because it's weird to think of America as so weak, but we definitely started out as weak. So it's definitely a steelman argument for a national government then. I've been reflecting on how we bicker about how big our national government is now. But at the time, these essays steelman why we needed a strong central authority. And also about the shipping and the pirates. Yes, absolutely. Between Dutch, British, anyone trading with us, and like basically they could, if they were to trade with individual states, they would be able to undercut, like, oh, we're going to go to Rhode Island because their shipping is way cheaper than New York. And New York could say, well, we have the specific goods, but that only goes so far. Eventually, you're going to undercut the country, but it would undercut the country. So that wouldn't work. And pirates, they needed national defense. And it was also pertinent that Hamilton, people probably know a lot about Hamilton because of the musical that's really popular right now.
I still haven't seen it.
I've watched 2/3 of it. I just can't get into it. I
No.
don't like it.
Why?
I think
Is it because it's not accurate or what?
It's accurate. The whole changing the race of the characters thing doesn't really matter. It is accurate to his story.
Okay.
I just don't like rap.
Oh, is it rap?
Yeah, it's like a rap musical.
It's rap, really? I thought it would have been.
Yeah, it's,
I don't know. I think musical, and I've only been to a few.
You think
Lion
that.
King, Aladdin, Lion King, and Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. Those are the three that I've been to.
I need to see Lion King. Yeah, good choices.
All
But
right.
I just can't get into it.
Okay.
But
It's
Hamilton-
accurate.
Yes.
Cool.
Because Hamilton's history was like, he wanted political power. He was really in the game of that time. But also, he got his start working for shipping companies when he was like 13. He started working, so he really knew the ins and outs of like what it takes for a shipyard and ships and inventory and all that stuff to work.
Yep.
So he wasn't just blowing smoke when he knew it's like, no, we need this structure of taxation, we need this structure of commerce protection and regulation, because otherwise, I've seen it before, Dutch and British are gonna work together to undercut us, and then we're never gonna get started as a nation.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you can argue that eventually the real wealth of our nation was the land, the water, the food, and like our nation feeds the whole world now.
Resources, yeah.
So it's difficult to say if we ever really needed a national government. Like, let's say for argument that we never got one. They just said, no, we want to stay decentralized. The wealth of our country might have been strong enough that we might have eventually be able to become a superpower anyway, but we'll never know because we do have a national government.
That's true. Yeah, we do. So let's talk about the individual papers.
Yes.
Right, because they were split up. 85, right? Is 85
Yes.
different papers? Okay, so well, I actually have something here. The first one, what was the first one? The first paper, Hamilton lays the groundwork for the rest of the papers by addressing personal bias and how it relates to motive and reason in politics. That's really important because that's never going to go away. And that's really interesting because right off the bat, they're saying that, there's bias and political motivations and motives behind everyone and what they're doing. And I like that because, he actually is very old English. There's a quote from Hamilton here. I'm going to try to read it and we'll break it down. It cannot be doubted that much of the opposition which has made its appearance or may hereafter make its appearance will spring from sources blameless at least, if not respectable, the honest errors of minds led astray by preconceived jealousies and fears. Hamilton. So, I mean, all I can think of is lobbyists,
Yes.
and how like the government has shifted from economy based, like you mentioned, he was in the business and he understood the way business and the Congress and protecting businesses is important. And now most politicians are lawyers now. They don't know economies, where Trump, has a degree in economics, which is an interesting, it's interesting to see that because he looks at it from a different perspective. Understanding businesses is a huge thing. So, now I've learned through this that the founding fathers understand business and understood how important it was to protect businesses. And I feel like we're losing that. Now it's all, these lawyers trying to lawyer their way through with semantics and these vague, power grabs. And the first paper talks about that.
Yep.
And how that is going to be prevalent moving forward. And we seem to have lost that. So the very first paper is like, hey, there's going to be people that are going to be jealous. They're going to have their own bias. We got to know about it and we got to be prepared for it. It's like, man, first paper right off the bat, slamming it home. To this day, very important.
Yes, it is, because it shows Alexander Hamilton's devotion to the noble ambition of the founding fathers, because America is an experiment.
Yeah.
The most risky experiment. Can all individuals of a massive nation each govern and be responsible to be able to govern themselves? And that's the experiment. And freedom.
Yep.
It's worked so far. It's done great things. But yes, I think one thing we might be heartened by is the kind of small return to notion of business. There's a few Republican congressmen and Andrew Yang who owned their own businesses first. And coincidentally, between Andrew Yang, he has compassion for people and wants the UBI, but also the Republican senators who have businesses, like the women, Lauren Boebert and Loeffler, I believe she owns a business.
Okay.
They're the ones who advocate for lower taxes. So, yeah, it would be nice if all our Congress people had to have their own businesses again, or at least respected it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, just look at the omnibus bill about how much money we give to the rest of the world. We didn't create this country to be this,
Pork barrel?
Okay, one way of putting it. But I don't know, how would I say it? Like the caretaker of the earth.
Yeah, the Earth's babysitter. Yeah.
That's a good way of putting it too. I used to believe we were the world, I didn't believe that we were. I believed that we acted as though we were the world police. And I kind of had an issue with it. I'm like, why are we policing the world? I kind of understand the need to keep China in check. if China wants to take over the world, newsflash, they do, and has admitted as such, there needs to be someone to check them, because I think if we weren't here, they would have already run rampant and taken over the world. So policing the world is one thing, but then giving, help monetarily to, how many different countries did we give money to? My
Basically
goodness.
all of them.
I know, it's a ridiculous amount. But, how can we if we took that money and stopped, giving it elsewhere, because it's tax money.
It's our money.
It's our money.
Yeah.
We're literally giving our money. I'm sorry, I say we. The government is literally taking our money, giving it to other countries.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
We don't, I get so upset because obviously the rest of the world hates America and they might treat Americans poorly or look down on us, but it's like, our government lies to us. We vote to them because they promise us that they're going to not do this stuff. And then it's the bureaucracies, the unelected officials.
Yep.
It's just one endless cycle that we don't control anymore. And that was not what the founding fathers intended.
Absolutely not. Yep. And it's interesting because, let's go to the next one. I want to talk about 10, which some have argued is the most important of the Federalist Papers, number 10. I actually have it here. Let me read it to you. Let's see here. Number 10 this is by Madison. The same. It's the Union as a safeguard against domestic faction and insurrection. Okay. Here's a little article I have about it. Federalist Paper 10 is often thought as the most important and the most famous Federalist Paper. Written by Madison, it deals with the problem of factions. A common fear for the new government was that small groups or factions would compromise the integrity and stability of the new government. Madison outlines the plan for a democracy that allows a vote per person, but also points towards the use of a republic, whereby citizens vote for delegates to make decisions for them, i.e. our modern Congress. He calls this a representative democracy, which we now have. See the first quotation below, which I will read. He sees this as a way to protect from minority factions taking over the government, but also as a way to protect minority opinion. Writes, fit people, as he called them, would make decisions, but would also have to negotiate, so that no one faction or corrupt politician can control the government. Did you hear all that I just said? Okay, now apply it to today, right? Think about what's going on right now. They're trying to get rid of the electoral college. It's written in our Constitution that we the people. Now, this Federalist Paper is saying that we are not a democracy, which we are not. We are a constitutional republic, okay? That even the minority has a say. Okay, these people that are all complaining that, majority rules, but then they want majority rule, they really have this double standard all over the place. Don't even get me started on hypocrisy, right? But we can see the importance of letting the smaller states have a say in the whole of what we are. And that's part of, a lot of this has to do with those smaller states. What were you telling me about Rhode Island? Tell me that story, because that's a small state. Rhode Island's tiny.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Rhode Island was one of the last ones to actually ratify the Constitution as it was rewritten, after the Federalist Paper arguments.
Yeah.
And if memory serves me right, it was because they were like a trade walkway between New York and a bunch of other states. And so that was lucrative for them because, as I said earlier, New York was like the richest one, the center of commerce. They had some of the most lucrative bills of sale before the currency was per se one currency.
Uniform.
So
right.
Yeah, it was basically in their benefit. It's like that bias, the parties working against each other. What did the factions?
Right.
It was basically the government was abiding by and getting money of being a faction or forming a confederacy or forming personal alliances with New York and not benefiting the rest of the union.
Yeah.
And also with your thing with the minority being represented, yes, it's because anyone who's Marxist or anyone who just doesn't love this country, essentially, or know much about it, not even love it, but just not know much about it, they misconstrue us as a democracy. But that's actually important because they don't realize that they are giving up their voice by undercutting the Electoral College. And that's one discrepancy, or one problem I've had with this recent election. It's like everyone's celebrating, oh, who cares, count all the votes even if they're fake. The liberals don't understand that they're watering down their own vote by promoting this cheating.
Oh, they have no idea.
Yeah. So a constitutional republic really, because you can still have the public square. One individual across the whole country can speak up in this country.
Yep, absolutely. Well,
I
was going to say, as long as we have free speech still, because we have, I mean, you saw what happened to Parler, right?
I think we're in the 11th hour of that.
Parler got nuked. They're supposedly they are going to get hosted by the same people that host Gab, so we'll see about that. But even today, I want to stay on the Federalist Papers. I just want to say, Twitter came out saying, it's terrible that, online suppression is a thing because there's some voting in Uganda or something. And we're like, what about the United States of America, huh?
It was incredulous at their flagrant hypocrisy.
Gosh, it's ridiculous. All right, but I want to bring up paper 39, actually, because I feel like it works. I mean, we need to talk about it because this is something that I found really interesting. So number 39, all right, this paper establishes that the Constitution is a pact amongst separate sovereign nations and not the consolidation of such into a single nation. We're called the United States of America, okay? We're not just simply America. We're the United States of America. Basically saying a governor is the president of their state, of their individual sovereign state, which is what we are. We're United States of America, okay? The president and Congress and, the judicial, the Supreme Court, like there are checks and balances that has become very powerful over the years, and it was explain what Abraham Lincoln did, because he expanded this, correct? Because it wasn't as big as before him. He's the one who actually did this, but he needed to, which is weird because it's like it was worth it because we ended slavery, which is absolutely worth it. We got rid of that, and we fought the Civil War and won and ended slavery, and it's incredible, but at the cost of now making the government super powerful, right? Go ahead. You were explaining it before the show.
Yes. I'll try to break it down into two parts. Okay. What I know that Abraham Lincoln did was twofold. He squashed dissidents.
Right.
And so he basically expanded the federal government's powers about people who criticize it. And I think he also expanded the federal government's ability to collect taxes because they were obviously getting really broke because wars are really expensive.
Hold on, that first one. I want to let's go back to that one because that's pretty crazy. Or you think about that. He gave the government the ability to squash dissidents.
Yes.
Right? So if you speak up against the government, he can get rid of you.
Yeah.
That's messed up.
Yes.
I don't think that when I think Abraham Lincoln, like I'm not thinking that he's squashing people that doesn't like what he has to say.
Yeah.
That's pretty dark.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
One thing I think he did was like one of his critics, I think he said, why don't you just go to the South then, basically. And I think he also like just suppressed certain newspapers from being distributed.
Wow.
Ones that were critical of the war.
Interesting. No bueno. All right, what was the second one? Sorry, I cut you off because in the middle of explaining it. So the first one, he was able to cut off dissidents. And what was the next one you were going to explain?
Those were the two explanations for what Abraham Lincoln did. But what was your question really quick? I lost.
I just wanted to know what Abraham Lincoln did to increase the power of the government in the Civil War. And you said the ability to crush dissidents and then something else. I don't remember the second one.
And gather more taxes.
Oh, and gather more taxes.
Yeah. I need to be careful, and I encourage you and everyone else out there to read up more on it because the Civil War is very impactful.
Yeah. Well, look, we weren't prepared to discuss the Civil War and what Abraham Lincoln. I kind of put you on the spot there. Sorry about that.
That's all good.
That
but
wasn't
about
the plan.
The Federalist Papers, what's tragic about the Civil War even happening is because in the negotiations for how to tax people, while forming the new Constitution, we almost got rid of slavery because it was supposed to be based off like a land tax at first, but then they said, no, don't do that. And then they said population. And then the southern states, of course, had slaves. And like, we don't want our slaves to be counted. So it's like we were so close. then to
get rid of slavery.
getting rid of slavery and saying, no, they're regular people. You need to be taxed according to being all citizens or just shut up. So it was like so close to being solved back then,
Dang.
but we didn't. So unfortunately, we got the Civil War and extra slavery.
But let's bring it back to the Federalist Papers
Yes.
because they actually talk about taxes, right?
Yes.
Which papers is that? Or
31 to 34.
okay, and explain what were they basically trying to get everyone to talk about?
It's
Just the ability to tax everyone equally, right?
yeah, basically, and like each, as we were saying before, each state is sovereign.
Okay.
And like that was taken to the extreme because different economies and different income and stuff like that, and they wouldn't be able to pull their weight. And so one big qualm that richer states had with like being united with these poorer ones, it's like, we don't want to pull their weight with like paying more taxes because of our populations or because of our wealth. It's like you're punishing the successful, so we don't want to unite with them. And it was like saying no. It was basically detailing, and there's so many details. I'm doing my best, but there's lots of details
no
about
worries.
how they would exactly relay taxes so that everything was taxed equally, and that New York wouldn't just get the shaft with getting taxed way, way more.
I am curious as to how they did convince those wealthy states that no, you're not going to just be pulling the weight of these smaller states. Like I know Rhode Island had its own thing, going on, but there are other small states that clearly didn't make as much as New York did, because New York was bustling,
Metropolis.
this metropolis, that had all of the businesses there.
And they still had rich farmland too.
Yeah, exactly. So they were making killer money. How why would they have ever been like, all right, fine, we'll start paying taxes and into this federal system and have them control stuff?
That jogged my memory about what I was explaining before about, like the Dutch and the British undercutting because using cheaper harbors and stuff.
Yeah.
That's what they convinced New York with, for instance, was we were going to say, hey, if we're going to be a united nation and our currency is going to be equal and united, this way, no matter where the British trade, whichever harbor, like in South Carolina or a New York harbor, we're going to have the same tariffs, we're going to have the same taxes, and we're just going to have the same laws with so that the British can't underbid with a poor state because they're desperate and based off cotton and stuff like that. Actually, I don't want to go back to the Civil War. One quick point. During the Civil War, that actually happened. Britain was wanting the South's cotton, and they were selling it to him cheap, and the North was like, what the heck? So they sold propaganda to Britain, and then Britain didn't want to buy the South's cotton anymore, and that screwed him over. But like I said, that separate confederacies with undercutting each other's economies.
Yeah.
That's the argument that they used. Succinct, the same tariffs and taxes would benefit New York in the long run because then your currency, your value, your goods don't get undercut or undervalued.
That makes a lot of sense. So, go there, go here, it's going to be the same price. So why are you going to go to some tiny little dock down in South Carolina? You're going to have to pay to have it shipped up to where all the stores are here in New York.
Yeah.
You might as well just come here in New York. The taxes are the same.
And they
That makes
just wouldn't
sense.
be offering different tariffs. It's like, hey, align with us. We'll give you good deals, and then you can stick it to New York.
Yeah.
That's what they were trying to prevent.
Okay. Right. Interesting. Okay. Well, good. All right. So I'm gonna read a little bit more about the paper 39, which was by Madison, which we kind of touched light it, and that is the paper establishes the Constitution is a pact amongst separate sovereign nations and not the consolidation of such into a single nation. I'm going to read a little bit more about this. Mm-hmm. If we resort to a criterion of the different principles on which different forms of government are established, we may define a republic to be, or at least may bestow that name on, a government which derives all its power directly or indirectly from the greater body of the people, and is administered by persons holding their offices during pleasure for a limited period or during good behavior. It is essential to such a government that is to be derived from the great body of the society, not from the inconsiderable proportion or the favored class of it. Otherwise, a handful of tyrannical nobles exercising their oppressions by a delegation of their powers might aspire to the rank of republicans and claim for their government the honorable title of republic. It is sufficient for such a government that the persons administering it to be appointed, either directly or indirectly, by the people, and that they hold their appointments by either of the tenures just specified. Otherwise, every government in the United States, as well as every other popular government that has been or can be well organized or well executed, would be degraded from the republican character. Term limits.
Yeah.
Term limits.
It's literally arguing
across
right there.
the board.
How do we not already have that? That's crazy.
I know. He's laying it out like it's gonna happen. Like, why don't we? How Biden's been? Everyone says 7 years. It's 48 years. Biden's been in our government institutions for 48 years. Some of these people are in there over and over and over again, and they're just mumbling and going with the flow. They don't even know that society outside of their little DC bubble has changed. Okay? And I think that's ridiculous. And we're losing the republic.
Mm-hmm. What's even more pathetic is that some of those people who have been in the government for like 50 years, they don't even pass any bills of significance.
I know.
I mean, I could be wrong because I don't. Anyway, isn't it Maxine Waters who hasn't actually passed any significant legislature?
Oh, I don't know. To be honest, my political awakening happened about a year ago. Not even a year ago. It was about maybe April, because the Timcast IRL show wasn't supposed to be political at all. We were supposed to do aliens, movies, culture, fun stuff, and then of course COVID hit, and it just became COVID and politics, and then politics, and then I had no choice but to become aware of what was going on. But it's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. All right, I want to stay on the papers. All right, I'm going to move to another, because there's many. There's 85, all right, and they're all very different. Some of them, like you said, 31 to 37 or something, right, is about more of the taxation and how that's going to work. Yes. I'm going to walk, oh, man, we're actually moving right along, aren't we? All right, I'm going to talk about Paper 51, and you actually, we talked about this a little bit earlier. This is by Madison. The structure of the government must furnish the proper checks and balances between the different departments.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Do you think that we still do that? Just asking, those watching. Do you think we still have a good checks and balances? Here they're trying to impeach President Trump again when he's got a week left. It's like, despite what you may believe, whatever, if he's got a week left, then what is their point? Don't you think they have better things to worry about? I just don't.
That's exactly it, though.
Yeah.
They are worried about him because he knows their secrets, and he could run again in 2024 if they don't impeach him. But people are dissenting, and the impeachment might not get passed. I hope it does not get passed.
Yeah, I'm seeing pictures of people, or not pictures, rather tweets and conversations about how this one Republican has said yes to impeachment. It's like, okay, and anyway, it's not gonna go that way. I doubt they're gonna impeach him.
You know what's interesting about that Hamilton quote that we started with? It's like it's essentially a bringing together of the entirety of the book, Thinking Fast and Slow, talking about all the biases, and like just that book is a really detailed book, but it's like a succinct version of that book. It was very interesting.
For those who don't know, the first quote that I read was about Hamilton's. It was the first paper. The very first Federalist paper is about the biases and motivations behind politicians, and talking about it and basically saying it's going to always exist. So just to lay out a little groundwork, I mean, I think it's more prevalent now than ever before, because back in the day, it felt like everyone kind of had the same idea: maintain freedom, fight against tyranny, which this country is founded because we were sick of, ruled by a king that told us what we were supposed to do, and we were like, we're done. Listen to you.
And fight for our interests of the American people.
Right.
It's like ultimately the fourth branch, the people branch, was the most important one.
Yes.
No longer.
Yes, exactly.
Well, it's still the most important, but they don't think so.
Well, I mean, we the people certainly think so, and I hope that you think so, because you are, well, if you are an American, I don't know if everyone who watches my show is American or not, but for my American fellows that are sitting here watching my show, we the people. This was founded on we the people, this being our country, America, the United States of America, mind you. All right, so I want to read a little bit more about Paper 51, which is about the proper checks and balances between the different departments. All right, this paper argues for checks and balances as well as a separation of powers. In creating this system, Madison's idea was that the politicians and the individuals in public service in the U.S. would have proclamations and ideas that they were passionate about what they wanted to work hard to enact. The logical solution to ensure that laws and strong ideas were not enacted by a small group of partisan individuals was to use a federalist system where each level of government had different branches, each branch having the authority to impact legislation proposed by other branches. One of the main ways the Federalist Paper 51 was able to encourage checks and balances was by emphasizing the word liberty and describing that liberty would directly result from the implication of these governmental concepts. We have to bring back checks and balances in the old-fashioned way. You know what I've seen in the past year? That as long as one group controls all the different facets, they can do whatever they want. That's what I think we're seeing. They have judges. I would like to say call someone out right now, but I'm not going to, because I know there's a microscope on me right now. Okay? People tell me all the time that my show's shadow banned. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, and it doesn't matter because I'm going to continue doing my show. Doesn't matter. But from what I've seen, okay, they have different facets and realized that if you just have all the different sides of the things, the checks and balances will always check and balance in your favor because you have everybody. And that's a scary thing because that's not true checks and balances anymore. They figured out if they just infiltrate everything, they got it done. They who's going to check and balance if they, if I pay you enough, you're going to agree with me.
Yeah.
Here's enough money. Okay? You work for me now. Good. All right. I'm going to vote this way. Which way are you voting?
The way you want.
Thank you very much. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how our system works nowadays. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have anything to say about 51? And we don't have too much more time, so
That's fine.
It's interesting. It's hard to squeeze the Federalist Papers into an hour. I think we're doing a pretty good job so far.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying this. And that's part of why I was psyching myself out. It's like, these are so detailed. I want to have everything memorized.
I know.
But I was listening to the Political Orphanage podcast. No endorsement by anyone. I just listened to it.
Okay.
But it was talking about how the judicial branch and how judges are supposed to be impartisan and things like
yes.
that. And so what's happening and what happened during FDR's time too is that the judicial branch, the interpretation of the law itself is becoming vulnerable to both factions, like polarizing everything.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be the center point, the stable point.
Yeah.
But it's still getting compromised and pulled, like with everyone referring to the judges, with how awful they treat Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh,
right.
and how they revere Ruth Bader Ginsburg, rest in peace, and Sotomayor and all that. That's not supposed to happen.
Right.
They're not supposed to be a Democrat or Republican judge. They're supposed to be a judge.
Or a conservative judge.
Yes.
It's like, and that's something that Amy always said. She's like, I just follow the Constitution.
Yep.
I'm a constitutionalist.
Yes.
Stop asking me what my personal bias of things is. They asked her, they were trying to trap her constantly.
Yes.
And it was so, now I wasn't political during the Kavanaugh hearings. That wasn't, I didn't pay attention back then. But you're right. And it shouldn't be that way. They shouldn't even be asking these things. Or maybe they should, because if someone is clearly biased going in, they should be checked. Mm-hmm. But it was brutally them trying to trip her up. That's what it was.
Yes.
Which is a shame. But you make a good point. That is what we need. We need the judges to be impartial. They need to interpret the law. That's it.
You can argue that the way to fix the problem, everyone's been, and I think about this too. How do we fix the problem? What do we do to stand up? What do we do?
Yeah.
I think you could argue that the way to fix the problem would be to slightly reform the legislative and executive branches again, so that they're more like the judicial branch again, and just interpreting the law and keeping it as small as possible. Not empty promises of small government, but actually like changing the law and the infrastructure so that we don't get oligarchy, but we also don't get fascism or whatever this system is that we have now.
Well, that's tough. Redoing what we have. I mean, some have argued, especially as of late, that that's a must. That we need to redo everything. I mean, the implications of that is incredible. Yeah, of course, massive. Like, geez, like what does that mean? Like, fire everybody and have a completely new government of people that I don't know. I don't know the answers to that.
Have some hope. That's what our founding fathers and the government that was set up just after we defected from Great Britain.
True.
They were all inexperienced and they all just stepped up.
Yeah, they were 20, 22, 19. These guys were young. Everyone, you picture George Washington in their head, and he's this old, white-haired military leader crossing the Rubicon, or not crossing the Delaware River, but, it's any of these people, you think the white-haired, but that came later. When this was going on, they were young. They were in their early 20s. These kids, they were, I mean, I don't want to say kids because, a 18 is an adult, and nowadays, you think what a 18-year-old is thinking, and they're thinking, who's going to be my next lay? Who's going to, where am I going to college? What am I going to do when I grow up? Back then, they knew exactly what they were going to do when they grew up. They had been adults for probably 5 or 6 years since they were, I mean, we are in a completely different place than where they were, All right, I want to get back to the papers. Let's keep trucking around and pinpointing a couple more specific ones. Is there any paper that I haven't talked about that you want to talk about?
No.
Okay, I want to talk about the 70th paper. Okay, this is by Hamilton. Okay, the executive department further considered. All right, in this paper, Hamilton argues that unity in the executive branch is a main ingredient for both energy and safety. Energy arises from the proceedings of a single person, characterized by decision, activity, secrecy, and dispatch, while safety arises from the unitary executive's unconcealed accountability to the people. According to Alexander Hamilton, a unitary executive is necessary to ensure accountability in government. Does that sound familiar to you?
Sounds great. Sounds like what we need.
I want to say that again. According to Alexander Hamilton, the unitary executive is necessary to ensure accountability in government. I know everyone who listens to my show knows exactly who I'm thinking about right now. Number 2, enable the president to defend against legislative encroachments on his power. Man. Number 3, ensure energy in the executive. Hamilton argues that a unitary executive structure will best permit purpose, direction, and flexibility in the executive branch, especially necessary during times of emergency and warfare. When I first read that, I got a little chills. I was like, wow, like that's incredible. Like, what are we seeing right now? Trump has been talking about making America great again, right? And what does that mean? And I'm thinking about the encroachment of power that these, I don't want to say Democrat, Republican, whatever, government officials, I'll just say government officials. Anyone has the ability to be greedy and to have power corrupt, right? And I don't think anyone is safe from that. And that's why earlier on, they talked about corruption and how it infiltrates. That's why term limits, I think, is important. But it's interesting that that's to ensure the accountability in government. It's like, man, that's what I'm seeing. All right, let's move on.
For the checks and balances, it would be a nice start if the officials themselves in our country would actually advocate themselves for term limits and limitations on their power, because power corrupts absolutely.
Absolutely.
And those who are most suited for power do not seek it.
Yep. That is that right there nails it. And that's a shame. Government seems boring and blah, a bunch of people discussing laws and blah, so boring. But in reality, it's like those people are dictating our future freedoms, which are, it defined what our freedoms are. We're born with those freedoms. The government doesn't tell us what our freedoms are. We're born with them, and it's there. They are now slowly reducing those freedoms in the name of safety and our for our betterment.
It's disgusting, but it seems like they're not even moving slowly anymore on the encroachment of our freedoms.
Ain't that the truth?
It's accelerating.
Yep, and that's the truth. All right, let's move on. This is Federalist Paper 78. This is by Hamilton. All right, this is about the Judiciary Department. This paper is cited by the Supreme Court the most fairly obvious reasons, or for fairly obvious reasons. It establishes the authority of the judicial branch to judge, not to act. We kind of talked about this already. Hamilton argues that life tenure is the most valuable advance in the theory of representation, representative government. Permanency in office frees judges from political pressures and prevents invasions on judicial power by the president and Congress. The concept of judicial review is also established in this paper. Unless the courts are independent and have the power to declare laws in violation of the Constitution null and void, those protections amount to nothing. And when you now that's in a perfect system where the judges are impartial and aren't Democrat or Republican, and now we have the left has been like stack the courts. It's like, God, you are literally saying throw out the Constitution. That's what I'm hearing every time whenever someone says that to me, stack the court, just throw out the Constitution, get rid of it. We don't need it anymore. What?
It also shows their ignorance about what political bias will do. It's like a boomerang effect. It will come back to haunt them, and then there will be no escape from it, because the very system that they created, that they wanted to inflate, will crush them. They don't understand how a smaller system allows them to speak.
Yep.
And they're doing it for political expediency and to crush their enemies and stuff like that. Why does anyone think that they should have that right to do that in the first place, since they're clearly just definitely biased, definitely out for blood, and just ignorant of how our system works?
I have an answer.
How could they not be? Oh, yes. What is?
I have an answer. Well, in the first paper, they talk about the biases in government and the motives, more importantly. So when you get enough people that mutually have the same bias, the same motives to undermine what we've got, and then they manipulate the population to believe them and to fracture and fight each other, and then they convince half of that that the other side is evil, then they become morally justified in cheating, in undermining, all of these conversations that we're having from the past Federalist Papers are so significantly blaring today. All the things that we're witnessing today in our government, they talked about. They laid it down. They're trying to prevent what is happening right now. There's no checks and balances anymore. Judges aren't impartial anymore.
And no, even if they are, they're like vulnerable.
Yeah.
To the polarization by the other branches.
Not only that, we had a judge in 5 or 6 months ago who her family got assassinated.
Good Lord.
Right. Her son was shot in the chest because she was one of the judges on an Epstein case. This is the kind of thing that is people don't even talk about that much, but that's still happening. Okay, these people have so much power and they're using it. We're seeing Jack Dorsey sent out a picture of a little heart with the top trending apps, and Parler was no longer on it. They're celebrating their monopolies now. Like you said earlier, they're not even going slow anymore. They don't care. It's blatant. Let's just take everyone's freedom away. If you don't believe the narrative, you're gone from the platform. And that's why I said earlier, I cannot believe that I'm still on Twitter. I can't believe it. I can't believe I'm still on YouTube. Here I am talking about how I see the government failing the founding fathers who laid out the groundwork to basically warn the citizens of this country about what's happening right now, what we're seeing in this country. And that scares me because no one's taught this in school. I was talking to my grandma yesterday, and she was telling me about how civics, learning about the Bill of Rights, learning about the Constitution. Did you have to learn it in high school?
Yes.
You did?
It was simply called government, though.
You had a class called government?
It was really boring, too.
Well, of course it is.
The other thing is, I didn't learn in that class that the people were a branch of the government. That's huge.
I didn't actually know that until today myself. That's interesting. The people are a branch of government. I love that.
It's like the
and
roots
it's
of the
so
tree.
true.
Yeah.
I love that. The roots of the tree. We hold up the government.
Yes.
Without us, what would they be? They wouldn't have any taxes to pay themselves. Right? You know what I'm saying?
No, printer go brr.
Yeah, exactly. Man, and what happened to civics class? What happened to learning, not even learning it? See, that's one part of it. All right? It's also the understanding of how important it is for us, that what it means to us. Okay, sure. Learning the information is like, yeah, okay, great, boring. But then once you really grasp how important understanding the system that has been in place to give us or to maintain our freedom. I want to say it because I don't want to say give us our freedom, because we have these freedoms, all right? And that the Constitution is to help us maintain the freedoms that we've got. These Federalist Papers are explaining to the different states, look, we're stronger together, united, exactly. The United States of America. Okay? And I thought this was important because I see way too many people saying we should be the divided states of America. Now, I used to say it as a joke last year when I was arguing with Tim, telling him, no, you're wrong, no civil war, I don't believe you. We are not the divided states of America. We are the United States of America. We need to remember that we are united, okay? We have to bring the power back to the people. And that's what Trump was trying to do. And that's part of the reason why I kind of gravitated towards that, because I do feel we, the people, have the power, okay?
E plural unum.
Thank you. Yep.
Also, it's like we need to be united as the whole people, but also stand up for the individual. I keep thinking about that one guy who was really upset in the airport because they put him on the no-fly list. And It's like all this talk about private businesses, but it's like, what about our rights? What's more valuable? And it's becoming apparent what it is, but I don't think we want to continue down that route.
No. I don't know if it was United. An airport, an air company, whatever, kicked an entire flight out off the plane for singing the national anthem. They all had their masks on, but they were singing the national anthem, so that they literally kicked off the entire plane. Get out, you're done.
That's insane. That's insanity.
It's insane. We are no longer allowed to celebrate this country, which is just appalling. The people that wrote the Federalist Papers, if they were alive today, they would be appalled. They would feel disrespected because people are not realizing what we've got. There are more free people on this planet right now than ever in all of humanity.
And fed people. I want those airlines that kicked off those passengers and who are oppressing the individuals to stop taking all tax subsidies now, because you certainly did not earn them. You are breaking the law by oppressing people like this.
You heard her. I agree with you. Why are they being bailed out? They're going along. I know why. I mean, I just answered my own question. They're going along with the authoritative nature of the people that are biased and are taking over the government. Mm-hmm. That's what's happening. I'm not gonna. Man, I'm probably gonna be booted for what?
Well, I know I'm not the most intimidating individual, so me talking crap like that probably makes them laugh. But you know what? Not everyone's like me. There's some really rough and tumble people in this country, and people are gonna get angry. People are getting angry, and
No,
people are gonna rise up.
people are pissed.
So you either deal with me and do things the logical way, or you'll learn things the hard way. I'm not threatening
Wait,
violence.
you're asking them to be logical? They
That would
threw
be nice.
logic. They threw logic out the window a long time ago. Don't you agree?
Yes.
Yeah.
The silent majority speaks with their dollar. So it's
True.
in your own logical interest to stop oppressing people, and it's also in our interest to, like, we do need civics, Adam. We
I
need
agree.
to format the taxes and the subsidies again and take back control
Yep.
so that they can't be manipulated like this anymore. But it's difficult. I don't know how, but I'm gonna learn.
Good. I believe that you will, and I know you. You're very smart,
Oh, thanks.
and
So are you.
Thank you very much. Maybe you and I combined will probably do big things.